I used to believe that if you followed the rules, kept your head down, and treated people fairly, things would work out. That belief lasted right up until the morning I woke up to the sound of machinery tearing my bridge apart. Not a metaphorical bridge. Not a symbolic one. A real bridge. My bridge. It was 6:17 when my phone started buzzing non-stop on the nightstand. I ignored it at first.
Demolished.
The lake mist was heavy that morning, and the quiet hum of water against the shore usually put me out like a light. But then the calls kept coming. I squinted at the screen. 12 missed calls. All from the same number. My neighbor, Carl. That's when I heard it. A deep, mechanical groan. Metal grinding against wood, followed by a sharp crack that echoed across the lake. I bolted upright. I didn't even bother putting shoes on. I ran straight out the back door, across the dew-soaked grass, straight toward the water. And there it was. A yellow excavator sat where my bridge had been standing for nearly 20 years. Its claw slammed down again, splintering the last intact support beam. Wooden planks collapsed into the lake with loud, final splashes. My bridge, my only direct access to the water, was being demolished. I shouted. I waved my arms. I slipped on the wet grass and nearly face-planted into the mud. The operator didn't even look at me. That's when I saw the white SUV parked near the treeline.
Clean.
Expensive. HOA decals on the side. My stomach dropped. Let me explain why that bridge mattered. I bought my Lakeside property in 2004, long before the area became a playground for luxury developers and HOA boards with inflated egos. Back then, the lake was quiet. Modest cabins. Retirees. Fishermen. Families who waved when you passed by. The bridge wasn't fancy. It was a simple wooden structure extending about 30 feet into the water. I built it with permits, inspections, and approval from the county. I still had the paperwork. It served 3 purposes. It let me access my boat. It allowed emergency services easier water access. It was the only shallow water crossing point on that side of the lake. And that last part, that's where things get interesting. When the HOA-backed Lakeside Haven Resort was built 3 years ago, my bridge suddenly became very popular. Guests used it to kayak. Resort staff used it for maintenance shortcuts. Emergency drills used it as an access point. They never asked permission. I didn't mind. At first. The HOA took over the area like a corporate invasion. New bylaws. New fees. New community standards. I opted out. My property was legally exempt. Older deed. Pre-HOA zoning. They hated that. From day one, I became the problem resident. Too quiet. Too independent. Too unwilling to be controlled. They sent letters about my fence height. My paint color. My mailbox. I ignored them. Then they started circling the bridge. The first warning came 6 months ago. A certified letter from the HOA claimed my bridge was structurally unsafe, environmentally harmful, non-compliant with new shoreline aesthetics. I laughed when I read it. They had no jurisdiction. I wrote back politely. Included copies of my permits, county approvals, inspection reports. Their response, silence, for about 2 months. Then came the second letter. This one wasn't polite. It stated that if I didn't voluntarily remove the structure, the HOA would take corrective action to preserve community safety. That's when I contacted a lawyer. He confirmed what I already knew. They had no authority over my property. 0.
None.
He advised me to send a cease and desist and document everything.
I did.
Again, silence. Until this morning. By the time I reached the excavator, half the bridge was already gone. I shouted, "Who authorized this?" A man in a crisp polo shirt finally turned toward me. HOA logo stitched neatly over his heart. "Sir," he said calmly, "this demolition is authorized." By who? The Lakeside Haven HOA. "You're trespassing," I snapped. "Get off my land."
Now.
He smiled. That smile still makes my jaw clench when I think about it. "You can take it up with our legal department," he said. "We're just executing orders." Another beam snapped. My hands were shaking.
Rage. Shock.
Disbelief. I called the sheriff. They arrived 20 minutes later. 20 minutes too late. The deputy walked the shoreline, took notes, spoke quietly with the HOA rep. Then he came back to me. "I'm sorry," he said. "This appears to be a civil matter. They destroyed my property." "Yes, but they're claiming safety violations and HOA authority. You'll need to pursue it in court." I looked at the lake. Floating debris. Broken wood. The remains of something I built with my own hands. The HOA SUV drove away without another word. By noon, the bridge was completely gone. By sunset, the water was calm again, as if nothing had happened. But something had shifted. They thought they'd won. They thought this was over. They had no idea what they'd just triggered. That evening, my lawyer called. "They did what?" he asked. "Demolished it. Entirely." There was a long pause. Then he said something that made me sit down. "Do not rebuild it." "Why not?" "Because what they did may have just handed us a nuclear weapon." I stared out at the lake. For the first time all day, I smiled. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was angry, though I was, but because my mind wouldn't stop racing. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the excavator claw smashing down, heard wood cracking, felt that sickening mix of powerlessness and disbelief. At 3:42 a.m., I got out of bed and went back down to the shoreline. Moonlight reflected off the lake like polished glass. The spot where the bridge had been was darker, emptier, a scar. I crouched down and picked up a broken plank that had washed ashore. The wood was still solid, strong, perfectly safe. Structurally unsafe, my ass. That's when it hit me. They didn't destroy the bridge because it was dangerous. They destroyed it because it was inconvenient. The next morning, my lawyer, Daniel, came over in person. Daniel isn't flashy.
No loud suites. No dramatic courtroom speeches.
He's the kind of guy who wins cases by reading every footnote, every appendix, every forgotten clause everyone else schemes past. He stood at the shoreline for a long time, hands in his pockets. "They really screwed up," he said finally. "You said that yesterday," I replied. "Explain how." He smiled faintly. "Tell me, did they ever build their own water access?" I frowned. "What do you mean?" "For boats. Emergency watercraft. Maintenance barges." I thought about it. The resort had docks, sure, but all of them were floating docks, meant for guests. Kayaks. Paddleboards. Nothing heavy-duty. "No," I said slowly. "They always used mine." Daniel nodded. "Exactly. Here's what the HOA never bothered to understand. My bridge wasn't just a personal structure. It sat on an easement. A legally recorded, county-approved easement that allowed emergency, maintenance, and utility access to that section of the lake.
Why?
Because decades ago, long before the resort existed, developers realized that part of the shoreline was too shallow and rocky for safe emergency docking. My bridge solved that. And when Lakeside Haven Resort applied for its permits, they referenced that easement. Daniel pulled out a folder thick enough to stun a small animal. "They didn't just benefit from your bridge," he said. "They relied on it to get approved." I felt a chill crawl up my spine. Meaning the moment they destroyed it without replacing it, or even notifying the county, they violated their own permit conditions. I stared at him. "How bad is that?" He looked at me. "Bad enough that if the county finds out, the resort can't legally operate." I asked the obvious question. "Why didn't they just build their own bridge?" Daniel let out a quiet laugh. "Because they can't. Not quickly. And not legally. Turns out, shoreline construction requires environmental impact studies, water management approval, wildlife disturbance reviews, public safety inspections. The process takes months. Sometimes years. And until they have approved emergency water access." I asked. "They're out of compliance," Daniel said. "Which means their operating license is hanging by a thread." I finally understood why he'd told me not to rebuild. If I rebuilt the bridge, I'd be fixing their problem. Instead, we were going to let it bleed. We didn't file a lawsuit first. We didn't send threats. We made a phone call. Daniel contacted the county planning office and requested a compliance review, citing unauthorized demolition of a critical shoreline structure tied to active commercial permits. That phrasing mattered. Within hours, the request was flagged. Within 12 hours, it was escalated. By the next morning, county vehicles were parked at Lakeside Haven Resort. White trucks.
Clipboards.
Serious faces. I watched from my porch with a cup of coffee. Later that afternoon, Carl, my neighbor, came rushing over. "You seeing this?" he whispered, like the resort might hear him. "I'm seeing it," I said calmly. "There are inspectors everywhere. Guests are asking questions. Staff look like they're about to cry." I nodded. The resort manager stood near the entrance, phone pressed to his ear, face red, voice sharp. By evening, guests were being offered refunds. By nightfall, boats were no longer allowed on the lake from the resort. And by the next morning, a bright orange notice was posted right on their main dock. Temporary closure order failure to maintain required emergency water access effective immediately 48 hours. That's how long it took. 48 hours after they demolished my bridge, their luxury lakeside resort was forced to shut down. That afternoon, I got a knock. I already knew who it was. The HOA president stood there with 2 lawyers behind him. Expensive suits. Forced smiles. "We'd like to discuss an amicable resolution," he said. I crossed my arms. "You demolished my property without permission." He nodded quickly. "A misunderstanding." "A felony," Daniel corrected, stepping up beside me. The HOA president swallowed. "We're prepared to offer compensation," he said. Daniel leaned in slightly. "No," he said softly. "You're prepared to offer everything." Because the closure was only the beginning. They hadn't even seen the lawsuit yet. They hadn't heard about the environmental fines. And they definitely hadn't realized that destroying my bridge had exposed years of corner cutting in their development plans. The lake was quiet again that night. But this time, it wasn't peaceful. It was waiting. The lawsuit landed 3 days after the closure notice went up. Not because we were slow, but because Daniel was precise. He filed it in county court, not civil small claims, not arbitration. The kind of filing that doesn't just ask for money. The kind that forces discovery. Wrongful demolition. Trespass. Interference with easement rights. Economic damages. And my personal favorite, willful negligence. When the HOA president received the filing, he called Daniel within an hour.
"We can settle," he said.
Daniel didn't even let him finish. "Discovery has already begun," he replied calmly. "It's out of your hands now." That's when the real panic started. Here's the thing about HOAs and resorts run by committees. They talk. They email. They document everything. And most of them assume no one will ever read it. Discovery cracked them wide open. Within a week, we had internal emails from HOA board members, resort management, their private legal consultants. One email, dated 2 weeks before the demolition, made my stomach drop. "The bridge is legally protected, but if we remove it quickly, we can deal with the fallout later. Worst case, we pay him." Another one. "County won't notice immediately. We should have at least a few weeks before inspections." Daniel printed that one out and taped it to his office wall. "Intent," he said.
Pure documente d'intent.
The HOA hadn't misunderstood the law. They hadn't been confused. They'd made a calculated decision. Destroy first. Apologize later. Use their money and lawyers to bully a private homeowner into submission.
They assumed I'd panic. Assumatide rabuil. Assumatide fol.
Once discovery revealed that the demolition was deliberate, Daniel forwarded the emails, legally, to the county. That changed everything. The closure order expanded. Now inspectors weren't just checking water access. They were checking shoreline construction compliance, environmental mitigation reports, emergency evacuation planning, permit representations. The resort had claimed, on paper, that it maintained independent emergency lake access. Which was a lie. A very expensive lie. Luxury resorts survive on reputation. And reputation does not like words like forced closure, county investigation, safety violations. Within days, refund demands exploded. Travel blogs started speculating. Local news station ran a segment. They didn't mention my name. but they showed the lake and the missing bridge. The HOA president came back, this time alone.
No lawyers. No pasture. No smile.
I made a mistake, he said. I didn't answer. We'll rebuild the bridge, he added quickly. Better than before. On our dime. Daniel shook his head. You can't. What? You no longer have permission to construct anything on his easement. The man's face went pale. You destroyed a protected structure, Daniel continued. You forfeited informal access. Anything new requires county approval and a revised permit. That could take months. Daniel nodded. Or longer. The HOA president rubbed his temples. Our resort is bleeding money. I finally spoke. You should have thought about that before you demolished my bridge. Their first settlement offer came that night. It was big. 6 figures. A non-disclosure agreement. A promise to restore relations. Daniel didn't even counter. He sent back one sentence. This offer does not reflect the full scope of your liability. Because by then we knew something else. Buried in the discovery documents was an environmental assessment the resort had commissioned, but never submitted. It warned that removing shoreline structures without mitigation could disrupt fish spawning, increase erosion, violate water protection statutes. The bridge demolition had done exactly that. Which meant the HOA hadn't just hurt me. They'd violated state environmental law. And the fines for that. They made the settlement offer look like pocket change. By week 3, the county was threatening permit revocation. The state environmental agency had opened a file. The HOA's insurance provider issued a reservation of rights letter translation. Their insurer might not cover any of this. That's when board members started turning on each other. Resignations.
Blame.
Leaked emails. One board member wrote, "Why did we touch his bridge at all?" One evening, I walked back down to the shoreline. The lake was calm, empty, silent.
No resort lights. No guest laughter. No Padlevo arts.
Just water. And the space where my bridge used to be. They thought they'd erased me. Instead, they erased themselves. There's a specific sound money makes when it's scared. It's not loud. It doesn't shout. It hesitates. That hesitation showed up about 10 days after the closure, when Lakeside Haven's lights stayed off for a 3rd straight night. Luxury resorts are designed to look effortless.
Calm.
Timeless. Like they exist outside normal rules. But behind the scenes, they burn cash like jet fuel. Staff salaries. Loan payments. Maintenance contracts. Refunds. So many refunds. And with every day the gates stayed closed, the numbers stopped cooperating. Daniel got the call on a Wednesday morning. He put it on speaker. "This is regarding Lakeside Haven Resort," the voice said carefully. "We've been made aware of ongoing compliance issues tied to a shoreline easement." Daniel glanced at me and raised an eyebrow. "Yes," he replied. "You have." A pause. "We're reassessing our exposure." That was banker language for "we're nervous." The resort wasn't just owned by the HOA. It was leveraged heavily. Multiple loans. Expansion plans. A future spa wing that now existed only in glossy brochures. All of it depended on one assumption, that the resort could legally operate. Right now, it couldn't. 2 days later, the HOA announced an emergency meeting. It didn't stay private for long. Carl sent me photos taken from across the street, board members arriving separately, not together. No small talk.
No smiles.
3 hours later, one of them stormed out. The next morning, Daniel received a resignation notice. Then another. By Friday, the HOA president, the same man who'd smiled while my bridge was torn apart, was no longer president. He wasn't even on the board. He was, according to an internal email, being asked to cooperate fully. The next settlement proposal arrived that afternoon. This one didn't feel like a negotiation. It felt like surrender with conditions. 7 figures.
Nonda.
Full admission of wrongful demolition. A written apology. And this part made me laugh out loud. A request for temporary access to rebuild an emergency structure. Daniel leaned back in his chair. "They're not asking anymore," he said. "They're begging." I stared at the lake through his office window. Is it enough? I asked. He shook his head. Not yet. This is the part people don't always understand. I wasn't trying to destroy them. They did that themselves. What I wanted was certainty. Because if I accepted too early, the resort might reopen, stabilize, and quietly treat this as a one-time cost of doing business. I wanted something stronger.
Permanent.
The county drops the hammer. That certainty came from the county. A revised notice was issued, conditional permit suspension pending infrastructure review translation. Even if the bridge issue was resolved, the resort would still need to reapply for shoreline access, update emergency plans, pass new inspections from scratch. Months minimum. Maybe longer. The bank noticed. It came late. Unknown number. I answered. This is the restructuring firm representing Lakeside Haven, the man said. We'd like to discuss asset separation. I blinked. Asset separation. Yes, he said carefully. Specifically, the easement. Daniel took the phone. You're proposing to buy it, he said. Yes. That changed everything. They didn't want permission anymore. They wanted ownership. Because without control over that shoreline access, the resort would never be bankable again. And they knew it. Daniel muted the call and looked at me. This is the leverage moment, he said. Once you sell or lease on your terms, this stops being a lawsuit. It becomes a dependency. I felt something loosen in my chest. Not anger, relief. We sent them a list. It wasn't short. It included full compensation for the bridge, permanent easement fees, annual maintenance payments, personal veto rights over shoreline construction, and a clause requiring county oversight. Forever they read it. They didn't argue. They asked one question. How fast can we sign? That evening, I stood by the water again. The sun dipped low, gold across the surface. For the first time since the demolition, I didn't feel like something had been taken. Something had been revealed. They thought power came from money, lawyers, boards, and authority. They forgot about one thing: the ground. And who actually owns it? The signing didn't happen at the resort. That was intentional. No glossy conference room. No lake views. No subtle reminders of what they'd once controlled. It happened in a plain county office building, under fluorescent lights that didn't flatter anyone. Power prefers neutral ground when it's being transferred. 3 lawyers from the restructuring firm. 2 county representatives. Daniel.
Me.
No HOA president. No board members. They were done making decisions. The documents were stacked neatly in front of me, thick, final, and unambiguous. I took my time, not to be dramatic, but because I wanted to feel it. The agreement did 4 critical things. Transferred permanent control of the shoreline easement, to me not least. Not shared. Controlled. Required the resort to pay an annual access fee indexed to inflation. Automatically enforced. Placed all future shoreline construction under third-party oversight, no shortcuts. Ever. Explicitly prohibited the HOA from enforcing rules on my property in writing. Recorded. Unchangeable. And then there was the clause Daniel insisted on adding at the last minute. A simple sentence. The property owner is under no obligation to reconstruct any structure previously removed. The bridge. Optional. Forever. One of the restructuring lawyers cleared his throat. So, will you be rebuilding the bridge? He asked carefully. I looked at Daniel. Daniel looked at the county official. Then I answered. No. Silence. You'll maintain emergency access, the lawyer pressed. Yes, Daniel said. Through scheduled, supervised, temporary installations, at the resort's expense. Which meant no permanent bridge, no free access.
No assumptions.
Every use required permission, paperwork, payment,
Time.
the exact things they hated. 6 months later, Lakeside Haven reopened. Quietly. No press releases. No grand reopening weekend. The spa expansion was gone. Half the docks were redesigned. Emergency access was limited and monitored. Guests still came. But something was different. The resort wasn't in control anymore. It was careful. The HOA survived. Technically. But its authority shrank. New board. New bylaws. A lot fewer threats. Funny how polite people get once their power is documented and limited. They never spoke to me again. They didn't need to. The paperwork did all the talking. Sometimes people ask if I regret not rebuilding the bridge. I don't, because the bridge was never the point. The point was ownership, respect, and the quiet realization that rules only matter when the people enforcing them understand where they actually come from. I still walk down to the lake in the evenings. The water is calm, open, uncontrolled, just the way it should be. And every now and then, I see resort staff standing at the shoreline, waiting for approval to do something that used to be automatic. They wait patiently. They always do now. They demolish my bridge in under an hour. It took them 6 months to recover. And even now, they never really did. Because the most expensive lesson they learned wasn't about law, permits, or money. It was this.